In this presentation, we've been talking about the different kinds of funds that your nonprofit can obtain. As a quick reminder, those are programmatic, general operating, capital campaigns, sponsorships, and in-kind resources. So we wanted to open the conversation, both here and in the forum space amongst yourselves, thinking through what kind of funding does your organization currently apply for and receive, and which of those categories does it fall under? In your experience, which of these funding opportunities are easier to obtain? Why might some funding types be more difficult to obtain than others? And if there are other types of funding sources or types that your organization would go for that it doesn't currently receive. So Asia, what have you seen in the organizations that you've worked with?
So I've seen a plethora of different kinds, and pun intended there. I've definitely seen in kind
Mm.
as well. But I also see that a lot less versus the sponsorships versus general operating support, because it just makes for a little bit more challenging to be able to
Mhm.
identify which of those funding opportunities that you can go for as a nonprofit, because there are a lot of opportunities out here that won't fund your general operating support, and they're really looking to just fund like your programs or events that you're putting on. And so in my experience, it's really been beneficial to really leverage and understand those different categories, as Anthony mentioned, in terms of what type of funding your organization currently receives or it wants to in terms of that category. Even if you have to put it in a chart for yourself to be able to track and monitor that, it makes it a little bit better to find those gaps to where you can identify those right opportunities, like what we're talking about right now in this module, finding those right opportunities.
Absolutely, and I would agree where general operating seems to be the holy grail. And there's
Mhm.
such a small percentage of the opportunities that are out there, and once those are open, everyone comes in to apply for them. And I think that gets to some of the mission alignment you see with certain funders, especially family foundations. There's a project that's near and dear to their heart, so they really want to ensure that every dollar they give out is supporting those efforts. And
Mhm.
additionally, and I think it's fair for people who are giving out of their own pockets, especially for larger nonprofits. So much of that revenue is going to the administrative fees when you have, if you're in multiple states, when you need a robust fundraising department, and the larger an organization is, the further away those dollars go to directly support the mission of those organizations. So I think that kind of bleeds into grant makers as well, where they just really
Mhm.
want to feel good about the resources they're providing and try to align their funding opportunities around that. And I would agree that the sponsorships and in kind are also a little bit easier to obtain as well. And I think a lot of that comes down to volunteering events, but also some fundraising events as well, like
Right.
things like a 5K. If you have a big gala event, that's what you really can start opening the door for those sponsorships. So thinking ahead, usually 6 to 8 weeks, if not more, is usually
Mhm.
a good rule of thumb for when you want to put in these sponsorships, and it's a great way to kind of chip away $2,500 here, $5,000 there. Giving folks branding opportunities. If you have a program put together,
That's good.
having
Yeah.
organizations, pay to have their name and logo displayed, maybe put a message in there, and also opens it up to in-kind as well. Maybe they can't cut a check, but they can help you set up. Maybe they can help leverage a connection to get the timer for a 5K put together. Maybe they can help, organization I've worked with have had like liquor provided pro bono,
That's right. Yeah.
for their galas. So there's a lot of ways you can kind of pull those levers. And I think this gets back to communication with funders and just giving the full scope of what you do, what the event is about, and some of the needs. And just thinking about what those budgets look like means you can more adequately address those with funders, let them know where the gaps are, and kind of give them a menu of options where they can kind of plug in and help support your mission.
That's a really great point. And I think also while some of our nonprofits are also reflecting with this moment in our module, are there types of funding your organization has never pursued, but maybe you wanted to explore? So finding those different gaps are really important. In your experience, Anthony, what has been some opportunities that some of the nonprofits you've worked with wanted to explore, but they never really executed?
I think capital campaigns come
Okay.
like first and foremost, where it is huge, it is scary. Some of the
Mm-hmm.
clients I'm working with are thinking about opening a new production facility, maybe revamping, their services, like making a hub, and that's a lot of money,
Yeah.
especially with inflation the last few years. Things that might have cost $1 million, pre-pandemic, are now three, four, five, and it can get overwhelming, and when you're already stretched very thin, the cost benefit analysis comes to, can we just kind of like tough it out, just kind of like try to squeeze more out of our current facilities and staffing, as opposed to jumping in and almost having a whole separate department of folks. A lot of organizations will hire people specifically for capital campaigns because it's a huge undertaking. It has a finite endpoint, but that comes with extra management, that comes with extra resources, and I think a lot of those capital campaigns are really relationship focused, which take time in their own sense. So approaching a funder and saying, "Hey, you've given in the past to support serving meals. Now we need a new soup kitchen. How do we talk about that? How do we make a check that was 50,000, like add a few zeros to that to help us offset these costs?"
Absolutely. That's a really great point that you bring up, and it's igniting something in me right now because that's one of the issues with my current client that they're facing. They're in the midst of a capital campaign, and their immediate call to action is fundraising efforts, but it's around a mission and like a call to action. But with that, the extra management definitely is coming into play with it of me and my team having to keep our pulse on everything that's happening in terms of dates, because we also have to be mindful too, and I want to give this pro tip to some of our folks that's listening, in the fact that you got to have that calendar ready to know if you're going to give someone a call to action, there may be an event or a holiday that's geared towards that. And so if we just keep it super general, Giving Tuesday. Yeah. Right? People plan in advance for that Giving Tuesday because we know a lot of nonprofits are going to leverage that particular day and time where folks want to give. But also, how are you going to be intentional? How are you going to be different? And when I say different, right, because that could be like a cliche and loaded question. What I mean by that is, how are you going to best represent your organization's mission where no one else can do it the same way that you and your team do it? That's what I mean by being different, because from a funding standpoint, funders want to be a part of things that are cutting edge. They want to be a part of things that are currently working, but everybody wants to be part of innovation. Everybody wants to be able to fund something that is new, but also still have that familiar feel of what folks are used to. And so that's kind of what helps you stand apart a little bit too.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And just thinking about selling your organization, both in terms of the mission, but also some of the opportunities. People love that exclusiveness. So a lot of the clients I work with, when they have an event, they'll have different tiers of giving. So, and typically they break it down by their units of service, whether it's, one produce box for a family, whether it's one meal served, whether it's one client that's going through their social service programming. And breaking that down for funders definitely helps them contextualize what you're asking for, especially with the programmatic grants. But when it comes to sponsorships or capital campaigns, a lot of nonprofits will have a wall of folks who gave, and certain amounts get you a little bit higher on that wall, or you have that gold tier next to your company's name versus like bronze tier. So that's human nature. People want to be part of the club and definitely get a little competitive. So having those kind of opportunities available is a way to incentivize donors, supporters of your agency to give a little bit more in a sponsorship, and give them a little bit of a target where maybe they were initially thinking about 5,000, but then they see, platinum tiers is an extra 2,500. Maybe it ups it up a little bit, and that comes down to documentation, communication, really showing the value of your mission and the opportunity for folks to be recognized for their contributions.
Absolutely, and also understanding where the funder is in their journey at that moment of the calendar. If there is an instance where they have an upcoming event that's close to the time that you want to pitch, that there's a sponsorship opportunity. If there's a time where to pitch this, that would be the time to do it. So again, understanding that relationship with your funder, we're going to keep drilling that throughout just all of the modules of this course, because that is something that is rare in the industry of funding in general, especially for nonprofits. It's oversaturated with transactions, in my professional opinion. It may be a different experience for everyone, but it's super easy to stand out, because all it requires is not being transactional, because there's so much transactional that takes place because it is such a fast-paced industry that we're in, because again, we're talking about human needs that we're meeting, and that's life or death, and that's also on a day-to-day and sometimes hour by hour, depending on which city you're addressing those needs for.
100%. And I think the last thing I would add is that when thinking about in-kind, I feel like that is where you can be the most creative in terms of reaching out. So Maybe an organization, we talked about some of those services like Microsoft or Google,
Yeah.
where you can really kind of supplement some of like the labor intensive parts of your job. And sometimes I'll have an RFA, sometimes I'll have a specific program for nonprofits, but there have been times at the organizations I've been working with and for that money's been tight. We've either had to cut back from using their service, or we knew that their service would be really beneficial, but we just couldn't afford it. And sometimes reaching out and talking to someone on the phone, like making that appeal, being realistic about why you need their service, why it might be a little bit tight, that can start a conversation. And maybe that translates to a free license or a discounted license that you have and you can use for your agency. And maybe down the line that relationship matures and becomes something where they support an event. Maybe they are a capital campaign funder. So again, just to underscore your underscore that relationships do matter, and that it's a continual conversation that evolves with your needs, with their needs and priorities.
Absolutely. And so, again, continue to engage with one another, continue to reflect specifically on what type of funding your organization currently applies for or what you're currently receiving. But also, again, bearing in mind to stay super organized and you have these charts and these breakdowns right in front of you because there may be a gap or a challenge that you're not addressing at this moment that you have the capacity to address. And if there is no capacity in your organization, right here in this course is an amazing opportunity for you to take to get to learn some of your other cohort people, get an opportunity to be able to learn about some of the other nonprofits that are in your cohort so that, I don't know, there may be an opportunity there to address some gaps together.